Pedro Pascal destroys liberal news anchor on live TV. The internet can't stop talking about it. The stage lights were blistering under the polished set of the Morning Pulse, one of the country's most watched and most politically charged talk shows. The crowd was buzzing. They knew this wasn't going to be just another celebrity interview. Pedro Pascal sat in the guest chair, relaxed but alert, his signature charm barely masking the sharpness behind his eyes. Across from him sat Max Donovan, a well-known liberal news anchor, infamous for cutting off guests mid-sentence and pushing them into tricky corners for that perfect viral moment. The camera's red light flicked on. "Pedro," Max began, already leaning forward, "you're known for playing tough, rugged characters. But in real life, you're quite vocal about social justice, empathy, and the need for community. Don't you think there's a contradiction there? I mean, do we really need more tough guy icons in today's society?" The audience chuckled lightly. They knew where this was going. But Pedro, he didn't flinch. He smiled slowly, tapping his fingers on the armrest. "You know," he said, "it's funny how we've started equating strength with toxicity, like being resilient, disciplined, or even protective is somehow a bad thing now." Max raised an eyebrow, ready to pounce. "But don't you think those portrayals in media encourage outdated ideas of masculinity? Guns, violence, stoicism." Pedro cut him off, voice calm but piercing. "Or maybe," he leaned forward, "people are just tired of being told that strength and compassion can't exist in the same person." The audience froze. Max blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. And that was only the beginning. The tension in the room grew thick as Pedro's words echoed through the studio. Max Donovan, visibly rattled but too seasoned to let it show, adjusted his tie and tried to steer the conversation back into familiar waters. "All right, Pedro," Max continued, "but the thing is, media has power. It shapes minds. Don't you think portraying these hyper-masculine roles contributes to the very societal issues we're all trying to move past? Toxicity, violence, outdated gender norms?" Pedro chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. "Max, the problem isn't the characters. It's the context. People want heroes who struggle, who fall and get back up. It's not about the muscles or the guns. It's about heart." The crowd murmured in agreement. "But you know what's really dangerous?" Pedro asked, his tone shifting. "When we start policing storytelling, when we label complexity as problematic because it doesn't fit neatly into an agenda." Max tried to jump in, but Pedro didn't stop. "Art isn't about making people comfortable. It's about making them think. And if that makes people squirm, good." The audience exploded in applause. Max's grin thinned. "So, you're saying artists shouldn't be held accountable for the impact their work has?" Pedro's eyes sharpened. "Accountable? Sure, but not silenced. There's a big difference." The energy in the room shifted. Pedro wasn't just defending art. He was taking a stand. "And let's not pretend," Pedro added, "that canceling people because of a fictional character they played somehow makes the real world better. We're smarter than that. Or at least we should be." The crowd roared. Even some of Max's crew couldn't hide their smirks. For a moment, Max hesitated. This wasn't going the way he planned. But he wasn't done yet. He flipped a card dramatically, revealing a headline on the screen behind them. "Pedro Pascal under fire for controversial comments on social media." The crowd gasped. Pedro smiled wider. "Ah, there it is." Max raised a brow. "Care to explain?" Pedro's response: "I could explain it. Or," he gestured toward the audience, "you could pull up the whole post instead of just the clickbait headline." The crowd burst into laughter. Max opened his mouth, but Pedro wasn't done. "That's the problem with modern media, Max. People don't want the truth. They want something to get mad about." The entire room erupted in applause, the energy now fully in Pedro's corner. And for the first time, Max Donovan was speechless. The applause echoed through the studio, some audience members even standing to clap as Pedro sat back, cool and composed, while Max struggled to regain control of the conversation. But Max wasn't about to let Pedro walk away with the win, not without one last attempt to flip the script. He cleared his throat, his forced smile returning. "All right, Pedro, since you're so big on context, let's talk about influence. You're not just an actor, you're a public figure. Millions follow your words, your actions. Don't you think that comes with a responsibility? Pedro nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely. But responsibility doesn't mean bending to every opinion that comes my way. It means being authentic, standing by what I believe, even when it's uncomfortable. The audience buzzed with approval. But, Max interrupted, some would say your opinions alienate fans who don't agree with your worldview. Isn't that divisive? Pedro didn't hesitate. You know what's divisive? Pretending that disagreement is the enemy. We've reached a point where if someone thinks differently, they're immediately labeled the bad guy. That's not progress, that's tribalism. The crowd erupted again, this time louder, more passionate. Max's grip on his cue cards tightened, but Pedro wasn't done. And Max, let's be honest, this whole interview, it's not about having a real conversation. It's about moments that'll go viral, headlines, clicks. You wanted me to slip up, to say something that could be twisted out of context. The audience fell into a stunned silence. He had called it out, right there, live. But here's the thing, Pedro continued, his voice steady. I'm not here to give you that moment. I'm here to remind people that it's okay to be complex, to have flaws, to say things that make people uncomfortable. As long as it comes from a place of honesty. The crowd burst into a standing ovation. Even some of Max's own production team clapped, though they tried to hide it. Max swallowed hard. Well, Pedro, I think you've made your stance pretty clear. Pedro smiled, that signature charm slipping through. Good. Then I did my job. As the cameras cut, the crowd still cheering, Max sat there, stunned. His gotcha moment completely flipped on its head. And Pedro. He stood, gave a humble nod to the audience, and walked off set, the clear winner. But the real battle? That was just beginning. The moment Pedro stepped off the set, the internet exploded. Within minutes, social media feeds were flooded with clips from the interview, especially the moment he called out Max Donovan's media tactics. The clip titled Pedro Pascal Exposes Media Hypocrisy Live on Air hit 10 million views within hours. Twitter was in a frenzy. Pedro Pascal just ended that dude's entire career on live TV. He didn't even raise his voice. He just dismantled the whole system with facts. The way Pedro flipped the gotcha interview into a TED Talk on media manipulation. Iconic. But not everyone was singing his praises. Critics jumped in fast. Another privileged celebrity playing the victim card. Easy for him to talk about complexity when he's protected by fame. Can we stop pretending actors are philosophers? The debate split social media into two camps. Those who saw Pedro as a voice of reason, and those who thought he was just another celebrity dodging accountability. But here's the kicker. Pedro didn't post a single thing. No Instagram story, no tweet, no statement. He let the conversation spin on its own, and it only made him look more powerful. Back in the newsroom, Max Donovan wasn't handling things quite as gracefully. Clips of him stammering mid-interview became instant memes. When you realize your guest came more prepared than you. Pedro Pascal, 1, on Max Donovan, 0. His network scrambled to spin the narrative, calling the interview a dynamic discussion on media ethics. But the internet wasn't buying it. Producers at the Morning Pulse quietly pulled back Max's next big interview, worried about more viral backfires. Meanwhile, Pedro was spotted the next day at a quiet bookstore in New York, thumbing through a worn-out copy of 1984. A fan snapped a blurry photo. It went viral, naturally. The caption? The man just called out modern media and then went to read about authoritarianism, king behavior. But the real conversation was no longer about Max Donovan or even the interview itself. It was about the deeper issue Pedro had unearthed, the toxic cycle of media clickbait culture. Podcasts broke it down. YouTubers made hour-long essays on it. News pundits debated whether Pedro was a genius or just lucky. Finally, after nearly a week of silence, Pedro posted a single tweet. The truth is messy. People are messy. Let's stop pretending the world is black and white. It was simple, honest, human, and it set the internet ablaze all over again. In an era where every headline is a battle and every word is dissected for clicks, Pedro Pascal reminded the world of something simple but powerful. Complexity isn't the enemy. Dishonesty is. So what do you think? Should public figures be held to impossible standards, or should we let them be human? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories that challenge narratives and make you think, hit like and subscribe. Because in a world full of noise, we bring you the stories that matter.